So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Much like the first, it has to be pretty obvious by now what my answer is to that question, but I'll say it anyway. Hi, my name is Terry Westwell and welcome back to Panic at the Book Club. This week we're discussing Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. If you'd like to take part in this online book club, you can find out more information on how via the channel's intro video. I list the next 4 books down below and on TikTok, along with the discussion days. That way you can choose the genre that best suits you and the best time frame to read it in. We also accept your book feedback in a wide manner of ways. Comment below a video, send me a voice note, or even send me a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you could just send me a direct message on Instagram. So she survived her first year at War College, but that danger is only the beginning. Everyone expected Violet to die during her first year, Violet included. But threshing was only the first impossible test meant to weed out the weak, the unworthy, and the plain unlucky. Now the real training starts, and Violet is wondering how she's going to make it through. It's not just that it's grueling and maliciously brutal, or even that it's designed to push the rider's pain to a whole new endurance level. It's the new vice commandant who seems to have made it his personal mission to teach Violet just how powerless she is. Although Violet's body might be weaker and frailer than everybody else's, she still has her wits and her will of iron. But leadership is forgetting the most important lesson War College has taught her. Riders, they make their own rules. But sheer determination won't be enough to survive this year, because Violet knows the real secrets that have been hidden for centuries. And nothing, not even Dragonfire, may be enough to save them in the end. Just your friendly spoiler alert that if you haven't read this book yet, I would suggest going doing that first, because beyond this point there will definitely be spoilers. Much like the first book, Iron Flame was a great balance between exciting adventure, spicy romance, and just a great narrative that would surprise just about anyone. I did love the first book, so I did have very high expectations of this one. And it does continue to be an easy read, perfect for anyone who is new to fantasy. I did feel like this one had a better balance between the fantasy element and the romantic side. It definitely was more focused on the fantasy, on the adventure, and on the relationship between the characters. But there wasn't a point where I felt like I was getting too much of one or the other. In Fourth Wing, it definitely did get to a point about 60% of the way through where it did just seem to fixate a lot more on the romantic element. But this one did just seem a lot more consistent, and we did still have our much loved spicy scenes, which I do think was written incredibly well. I think those sort of scenes must be really difficult to write and them not come across really cringy. Instead, I think they were very creatively written and executed really well. I was always really curious about how Lilith Sorrengail's character would develop, and I was not disappointed. I do think her narrative was a little stereotypical in the way that it ended, but stereotypes exist for a reason, and it was still really surprising. Especially considering how much Lilith Sorrengail did, in fact, dig her heels in throughout most of the book. Saying, I love you enough to bear the weight of your disappointment, but clearly you don't love them enough to just get your act together and listen to your children. Consistent to my prior thoughts, I do think that Xaden and Violet were written quite well, and for what feels like the first time ever in a book, we actually get to see characters deal with their problems in a way that just seems a lot more adult. Waiting until they've calmed down and discuss it like two people in a healthy relationship should. Now, do I believe they have a healthy relationship? Hell no. But I think that's more to do with circumstances than genuine incompatibility. Like, it would have been completely illogical and totally stupid for Zayden to tell Violet his secret before this point. But you can also understand why Violet might be upset about more secrets. And unlike other books, especially fantasy books, the author didn't forget that they are in fact just some 20-something-year-olds. So showing these insecurities that they have with themselves and with their relationships, I think, is quite important. Just sometimes I do find that characters are written as 20 going on 40 just because something more serious is going on, when in fact I think they would still act as 20-year-olds at least some of the time. The dialogue between these two characters, Zayden and Violet, are written really beautifully, and you don't say stuff like that to each other and not end up together. So my original sentiment does still stand. We love Zayden. Zayden is ours, and Zayden will be with Violet forever. Okay? Good. I mean, I think Zayden said it best when he threatened he would kick someone's ass for even implying that there was a possibility of any future where him and Violet weren't endgame. To be honest, I found that although the ending was shocking, I wasn't particularly surprised by it. I mean, after discovering that Jack, I mean, little tangent, but what the actual bringing Jack back? Jack. But after discovering that Jack was actually Vernon and Nolan was trying to fix him this whole time, I did suspect that something bigger might happen to make finding a cure or fixing the venin as something a lot more crucial. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that the thought of them needing to work with Nolan in the next book to help try and find a cure for Zayden didn't piss me off. Like, I did eventually come to terms with the fact that they were working with and maybe even forgiving Dane. Like, he didn't really know what he was doing, but Nolan, he fixed up Violet just enough so that she can continue to be tortured over and over and over again. Like, there's just some stuff you don't come back from. Although I suppose I did think the same about Dane. Who, FYI, I still don't like. I now just sort of have these general wishy-washy whatever feelings about him. In this book, we do have a lot more potentially essential characters, which kind of makes sense as we're getting to know what's going on, we're getting to know the enemy, and we're building alliances, which I think has been done quite well. I think a lot of the potentially important characters are pretty easy to remember, despite how many of them there are. And in contrast, a lot of the less critical characters aren't focused on too much, but aren't totally ignored either. Which I think Rebecca Yarros has achieved quite a large character group without it getting too messy or too difficult for the reader to follow, which I think is a huge achievement in itself. I am excited to find out more about Andana. And she is still the dragon that we do all know and love from the first book, just with an extra side of attitude, which I really like. I mean, she was worried that Violet would be disappointed that she can no longer stop time, which was a little heartbreaking. But what does this mean for Violet's potential second power? I also really liked the idea that she had chosen Violet before she had even met her, before Violet had even become a dragon rider. I just think it was a really cute yet significant point. Also, I find it quite sad that Violet might never get to fly with her. I just don't want it to be right. Tan and Violet are an amazing team, but I just feel really bad for Andana. I don't think the twist with Andana was all that surprising. There were a lot of hints throughout the book, none of which did I fully catch on to until quite late on. I was starting to suspect, but it was a really big twist, and I didn't actually start suspecting until pretty late on when I think the author actually wanted you to. Throughout the book, Ten was on pretty good form, but I felt a little bad for the dragon. He was being lied to as well. His rather graphic threat to eat Varish alive was amazing. Varish was an One of my favourite lines in the whole book was after Violet unalives him, after he's tortured her for a week, and she says, well, what the am I supposed to do now? Go back to class? That did make me giggle. Again, I loved the story and I loved the cliffhanger. The only thing I don't like is that I now have to wait for the next book to come out. I think this book is definitely proof that Rebecca Yarros can write some good twists and turns, so I think there'll be high expectations for that third book to follow in the same footsteps as the first and second, so there's definitely some pressure there. My theory is that this sage is in fact Xaden's mum. He hasn't seen her since she left when he was 10 years old, so she might know best how to push Xaden's buttons, and that threatening Violet would in fact work. Maybe they didn't want Xaden to change just because of his powers. Maybe it was also because there's that connection there. They obviously want Violet for her power as well, but there's been no real power move to get Violet to make the change. So if they wanted both of them for their powers, why only kidnap one but make the other change? Why the difference? So as for the question, would I recommend the book? Much like the first, it has to be pretty obvious by now what my answer is to that question, but I'll say it anyway. Hell yes. I just think it's an excellent romantasy, perfect for anyone who's new to reading fantasy, but also great for anyone who already loves the genre. It isn't the most serious fantasy book ever. It jumps straight into the storyline and it doesn't spend a ton of time building an overly complicated world. But it's really nice to have this fantasy series that's so easy to follow, so easy to read, and it doesn't lose any of that enjoyment for me. And I do also think that this book was a lot more balanced. The battle scene was exciting and suspenseful, and I can guarantee that this series will be on my frequently reread list. This time we're going to have to wait longer to read the next book, but bring on the politics, bring on the dragons, bring on the magic, and of course bring on the romance. But let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy the book? Shelley says she's enjoying this book so far, but she does have about 2 hours left. Unfortunately, work is just getting in the way of some good reading. She says the book's just as good as the first so far, with a great storyline and a need to know what happens next. Is there a third book? Because she wants to read it now. But unfortunately, we'll have to wait longer to get our hands on that third book.
I read the book. I think my main issues with the book are the same issues I had with the first one, is I keep on expecting more world building elements to kind of engross me more into the world, and it's kind of layered a bit thin for a fantasy book. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think what puts people off fantasy quite a lot is how it gets really up its own. It took me a while to finish it, to be fair, because I kept zoning out the end, but again, I don't think that's the book's fault. I think that's just me not feeling that invested. The little twists were good. You could have called them. I didn't. It was enjoyable. Again, like if you're on a plane or like it's your first step into fantasy, you don't want to put up with like Tolkien or Brandon Sanderson or anything actually complicated. It's like probably a really good middle ground or first step sort of thing. But like, I'm really not sure I'm going to bother reading the third one. Again, I don't think I'm the target audience. So probably not the end of the world. Yeah.
So, Iron Flame was good. I really enjoyed it. Completely binged it in like 5 days, which is saying a lot because it's a chunkster of a book. It wasn't as good, I thought, as Fourth Wing. I really enjoyed the character development. I enjoyed seeing like these relationships that weren't just romantic. I really enjoyed seeing how her friendships kind of panned out, like the whole, oh, we're all gonna make it to graduation thing. Like, I really loved the friendship side of it. I've got to say, I did not understand in the beginning why they all went back to the college. I don't know why they went back. They knew that the guy in charge had just tried to kill them. I guess it was in part to protect the others, which is good. I didn't really like how hers and Zayden's relationship progressed. It didn't really make tons of sense to me. I'll be honest with you, like as long as you ask me the right questions, sort of thing. I was like, what is that? Like that's not open honesty. And then he just isn't. Like the first thing she asks about him when it comes to the second signet, and he's like, yeah, nah, I'm not telling you about that. And it's like, what? Come on, dude. You're on the same side. Your dragons are bonded. There's no reason that you shouldn't like just tell her everything. Her dragon was like really pissed off at Segale because she didn't tell him about the second signet. But in the first book, they made it clear that the reason Violet didn't get to know everything was because bonded dragons are the only bond that's stronger than the bond a dragon has to a rider. So I don't understand why Segale was keeping Xaden's secrets for him. I thought the torture chapter was fantastic. I was like, yeah, this feels like good torture. Like this feels realistic. I did like the fact that she was kind of visited by Liam. I thought that was really sweet, and I like that you don't know whether it was real or not. And it was really nice to sort of like have his character back a little bit because like I'm not even kidding. Like I'm kind of pissed off that he died at all. He was like the best character. I don't know what the writer was thinking. Literally kill anyone else. He was the best one. I was kind of expecting more to happen with Sloane, the sister. It was quite heartwarming, the whole letters thing, like getting one letter a week thing. And she warmed up to us. So like, I can accept that. Yeah, I've kind of just got like mixed reviews about the whole thing. I appreciated the twist at the end. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's foreshadowing, but I didn't see it coming, like him becoming Venin. I will say as well, I didn't like the fact that Xaden, it's really unclear what his intentions are. You cannot tell if he's on her side, if he's going behind her back and doing really dodgy shit. You cannot tell what's going on. And I feel like the only way you get solid proof that he's not actually an is that last chapter in Fourth Wing. It's only then that you kind of get this like solidified feeling that, oh, actually, they are in love, like, and he does love her, and it is pure and it is real. Because if it was all from her perspective, you would not know what is going on with that guy. Like, and it just really bugs me. I don't understand the secrecy. I don't understand why it's necessary.
Next week, we'll be discussing the Satsuma Complex by Bob Mortimer, so don't forget to get your comments and thoughts in by Monday, the 11th of December at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram. The following week, we'll be discussing Haunting Adeline by H.D. Charlton, but don't forget, if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do now list the next 4 books down below and on TikTok. That way you can choose the genre that you prefer and the best time frame for you to read it in. I thank you all for joining, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really means a lot, and I will see you all next week. Bye.